They said I was just a replaceable assistant, someone to fetch coffee print papers and stay quiet. But when my boss stole my idea and smiled while taking all the credit, something inside me snapped. She stood at the podium, basking in glory, while I sat there invisible. That day, I made a silent promise: if I was so replaceable, then so was she. And trust me, I kept my word. Ever felt underestimated at work? This story is for you. If you've ever been silenced, stepped on, or told you're just support, hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe for more powerful revenge stories. My name is Natalie Moore. I'm 31 years old, born and raised in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I've spent the last 6 years of my life working as an executive assistant at Brightleaf Creative, one of the most well-known marketing agencies in Chicago. Every morning, I arrived 15 minutes early with coffee for the entire team, especially Carla, my boss. I organized her schedule, took her calls, picked up her dry cleaning, and even walked her dog twice when she was too stressed before a pitch. If there was an unspoken list of things assistants were expected to do, I had already mastered it. And then some. But here's the thing. I didn't come into this role hoping to stay invisible. I graduated top of my class in communications from Northwestern. I'd interned with major firms, led student campaigns that went viral, and spent hours building my portfolio. I joined Brightleaf because I genuinely believed it was a place where creativity and drive would be recognized, where ideas could come from anyone, even someone without a corner office. But it didn't take long for reality to kick in. Carla Peters, my boss, was a woman in her mid-40s, sharp-suited, sharp-tongued, and always on edge. She had a reputation for being cutthroat, demanding, and brilliant, and while some admired her, most feared her. She had zero tolerance for mistakes, and even less tolerance for ambition, especially if it came from someone beneath her. To Carla, I was a utility. An extra pair of hands. She never saw me as a thinker, or worse, a threat. She'd toss tasks onto my desk like I was a dumping ground. Natalie, can you format this deck? Natalie, reschedule my nail appointment again. Natalie, make sure no one speaks unless I say so in the meeting. And I did it all silently without fuss. But every time she dismissed my potential, a small fire burned inside me. I wasn't just taking notes during meetings, I was absorbing, learning, observing client behavior, dissecting campaign strategies, and storing up all the little gaps that I could see, but no one seemed to notice. When Carla rushed presentations or steamrolled clients with her one-size-fits-all solutions, I made quiet mental notes about how I would do it differently, how I would do it better. Still, I kept my head down. I was patient. I waited for the right moment to prove myself. That moment came on a rainy Tuesday morning. The agency was preparing to pitch for one of the biggest clients we'd ever had, an eco-friendly clothing brand that had exploded on social media. Everyone was buzzing. Carla, of course, had claimed creative lead and was scrambling to put together a bold concept that aligned with the brand's values. She barked at the team-rejected idea after idea and finally locked herself in her office with a bottle of green juice and noise-canceling headphones. Later that night, I stayed behind to clean up the conference room and couldn't stop thinking about the campaign. I had an idea, a real one. A fresh, authentic campaign that combined user-generated content with micro-influencer storytelling, tying it all together under a slogan that practically wrote itself. I sketched it out, built a small deck, and printed a copy for Carla's desk. The next morning, I handed it to her with a hopeful smile. "Just something I thought of," I said carefully. "In case it sparks anything." She looked at me like I'd handed her a flyer for a garage sale. "Thanks," she muttered flatly and tossed it on top of a pile of folders without a second glance. I tried not to take it personally. I told myself it was enough that I'd put myself out there. But deep down, I knew the truth. Carla didn't care where good ideas came from. She only cared if they came from her. And I was about to learn just how true that was. A few days later, we gathered in the glass-walled conference room for the big pre-pitch meeting with the senior leadership team. Carla walked in 5 minutes late, all business, in her tailored navy suit, carrying a stack of papers under one arm and a bright smile rare for her. Something was off. She wasn't scowling. She was glowing. Then she clicked the remote, and the first slide popped up on the screen. My jaw tightened. It was my campaign, my exact structure, my title, my slogan, my mock-up graphics that I had carefully chosen from free-use sources. Line by line, image by image, Carla was presenting my pitch deck as her own. No credit, no mention, not even a nod in my direction. She moved through the slides with charisma and confidence, pitching the idea like it had come to her in a dream. I sat there frozen, staring at the screen, while everyone around the table murmured approval and nodded with excitement. One VP leaned forward and said, "This feels so fresh. This is exactly what we need to win this client." Carla smiled, modest but proud. Well, she said I knew our team needed to elevate the way we approach authenticity and branding. I spent all weekend refining this strategy. I felt my stomach drop. I looked around, but no one else knew. No one else could know. Only Carla and I had seen the original deck. It hadn't been emailed. It hadn't been shared. I'd handed it to her physically on a piece of paper. She had copied it. It rebranded it and claimed it. And now she was being praised for it. After the meeting, as everyone filed out talking excitedly about Carla's genius, I followed her back to her office. My hands were shaking. I shut the door quietly behind me. "That campaign," I said, "it was mine." She barely looked up. "Excuse me. The one you just presented, I gave it to you last week. That was my pitch. Word for word." Carla set her pen down and leaned back in her chair. Her face was calm, even amused. "Natalie," she said with a sigh that dripped condescension, "let me give you a piece of advice. In this industry, ideas are cheap. Execution is everything. And what matters is who has the platform. You don't, I do." I stared at her, stunned. "You're an assistant," she continued, as if explaining something to a child. "You print things. You book meetings. You make sure the coffee is hot and the room is clean. That's what you're paid to do. Leave the campaigns to people who actually matter." She turned back to her laptop. "And if you're upset," she added without looking up, "maybe think twice before giving away something you weren't ready to fight for." That moment broke something inside me, not just because she'd stolen my work, not just because she'd humiliated me in silence in front of the entire leadership team, but because she enjoyed it, because she wanted me to know I was beneath her and always would be. I walked out of her office in a daze, but I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't quit. Instead, I opened my notebook. Because if Carla believed I was too small to matter, too weak to fight back, then she had made the biggest mistake of her career. She had underestimated me. The next few weeks were torture. Carla basked in praise while I continued doing all her menial tasks. She started calling the pitch her proudest campaign yet. I had to print reports about it, compile the stats, schedule interviews where she got to talk about my work on national podcasts. The client had officially signed, and she was being hailed as the new star of the agency. Meanwhile, I was still ordering her salads. One afternoon during a team huddle, a junior associate shyly asked, "Where did the original idea for the slogan come from?" Carla laughed. "Oh, you know, It just came to me in the shower. My nails dug into my palm so hard I left marks. She wasn't just stealing, she was rewriting history. Every day that passed, without anyone knowing the truth, made the rage grow deeper inside me. But I stayed quiet. I smiled. I played the same loyal assistant she believed I'd always be. But behind that calm mask, I was preparing something far more powerful than she ever expected. And when I finally struck, I'd make sure she never saw it coming. I didn't sleep for days. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Carla at the front of the room, grinning under those warm office lights, letting applause roll over her like waves on a beach she didn't build. I kept replaying that moment in her office, the way she spoke to me, like I was dirt beneath her heels, like I was lucky just to exist in her shadow, like I'd never be anything more than someone she could step on to climb higher. But here's the thing about people like Carla. They believe cruelty is strength and silence is weakness. What they don't realize is that silence can also mean calculation. And I was calculating everything. It started with collecting. Not just memories or feelings, but proof. I went back to the original document I'd created. I had timestamps, creation metadata, and handwritten notes with the date. I still had the printout I'd given her, the one she'd tossed onto her desk with that casual flick of her wrist. I took photos of it, scanned it, backed it up to 3 different clouds. Then I started paying closer attention at work. Carla was sloppy with power. She barked orders in open spaces, spoke freely in hallways, and had no idea that the people around her were listening. Or worse, recording. One morning, while she was yelling at a junior designer for stealing her aesthetic, I hit record on my phone, just in case. Another afternoon, she talked about how exhausted she was from holding this whole company together with just one brain. I caught it on a voice memo she didn't even notice me activating while I typed minutes. Every arrogant, backhanded thing she said went into a growing file on my personal drive. A collection I titled The Truth About Carla. But even with all of that, I still felt trapped. Because I wasn't just facing a toxic boss, I was facing the system that protected her. Carla had connections. She went to dinner with the partners. She played tennis with HR. People in the office owed her favors, and she cashed them in freely. I couldn't just walk into a room and accuse her of stealing my idea and expect justice to rain down. I needed more. Something irrefutable. Something that couldn't be explained away as bitterness or ambition. That's when the opportunity presented itself. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon during a follow-up strategy session with the new client. Carla was preparing to present a refined version of my campaign. I was tasked with setting up the Zoom call, preparing the deck, and printing talking points for her, and that's when I saw it, a post-it note stuck to her talking points. Don't forget. If asked where slogan came from, say, team brainstormed it. I stared at those words stunned. She knew. She knew what she was doing was wrong, and now she was planning cover stories in case anyone dug deeper. I carefully peeled the post-it from her folder, slid it into my planner, and took a photo of it next to a time-stamped daily briefing. More evidence, not just of theft, but premeditated deceit. That night, something inside me shifted. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was angry, righteously angry, and I knew I had to act soon because if I didn't, she would win. She would ride my work all the way to a promotion. Or worse, my promotion. But even knowing all that, I still had doubts. What if no one believed me? What if I was seen as petty, emotional, unstable? Women in corporate settings know how thin that tightrope is. One step too bold, and you're labeled difficult. One move too assertive, and suddenly you're the problem. So I did what I always did. I went home, sat in my tiny apartment, and thought it through. Carefully, strategically. And then I remembered the audio file, the one I'd captured weeks ago, the one where Carla said almost proudly, "Ideas are cheap. It's not about who thought of it, it's about who gets credit." That line, that arrogant venom-laced line, combined with the post-it, combined with the original pitch document, combined with the time-stamped deck, it was more than enough. Still, I didn't rush. I wasn't going to storm into HR with fury and tears. No, that wasn't my style. Instead, I prepared a full report. A calm, organized, devastatingly clear email. Subject line, intellectual property misattribution, formal concern. I detailed the timeline. I attached the documents. The scanned post-it, the voice memo. I explained what had happened, how Carla had taken my work and presented it as her own, and how she had carefully tried to hide that fact. Then I paused before hitting send. My hands hovered over the keyboard. My heart raced, because this wasn't just about an idea. It was about every time I'd been told to know my place. Every time a man or a woman in power had patted my head and told me to wait my turn. Every time I'd been good, quiet, obedient. Screw that. I hit send. And in that moment, I didn't feel powerless anymore. The morning after I sent the email, I arrived at the office early. The lights were still off in most of the building. My coffee sat untouched beside my keyboard as I refreshed my inbox again and again. For a brief, terrible moment, I wondered if I'd just ruined my career. What if they dismissed me? What if Carla spun the story first? She had the charm, the connections, the experience. I had a file full of receipts and a trembling hope that truth still mattered. At 10:43 a.m., the email came. It was short. "Natalie, we've received your documentation and take your concerns seriously. Please come to HR at 2:00 p.m. for a formal discussion." Marlene, HR Director. My heart dropped into my stomach. At 1:58, I knocked on the HR door with hands that wouldn't stop sweating. Inside sat Marlene, cool and composed, and another man I recognized from legal, one of the internal counsel advisors. They asked me to walk them through everything again, so I did, calmly, fact by fact, date by date, no drama, no tears, just the truth. I showed them the original pitch, the time-stamped drafts, the post-it note. I played the audio clip. Carla's voice dripping with arrogance as she claimed ideas didn't matter. Only power did. When I was done, there was silence in the room. Marlene leaned back and exchanged a glance with legal. "Thank you, Natalie," she said. "We'll review this carefully. We'll be in touch soon. Please don't discuss this with anyone in the meantime." I nodded quietly, excused myself, and walked back to my desk. And then I waited. Hours passed, then days. Carla didn't say a word. Neither did HR. But something was different. People were whispering more. Carla seemed more tense, snapping at even the most innocent questions. She spent more time in closed-door meetings, came out red-faced and silent. On Friday morning, it happened. I came into work and found her office door closed, locked, which was strange. Minutes later, a message popped up in the company-wide Slack All Hands meeting at 9:15 a.m. Attendance required. Everyone filed into the large conference room. The partners stood at the front, their faces serious. Carla was nowhere to be seen. Marlene stepped forward. "We wanted to inform everyone that effective immediately, Carla Peters has been placed on indefinite suspension pending an internal review. In the interim, we'll be shifting leadership responsibilities among our senior teams. A buzz spread across the room like electricity. I sat completely still. They didn't say my name. They didn't point fingers. But I felt the shift. People glanced toward me, not with pity or mockery this time, but with something new. Recognition. I left work early that day. I walked to the lakefront and just stood there watching the waves. She was gone. But the thing no one tells you about finally taking down your tormentor is how hollow it can feel. Because yes, she stole my work. Yes, she humiliated me. Yes, she deserved consequences. But I'd spent so long carrying that pain that when it was finally lifted, I didn't know who I was without it. That night, I sat in my apartment with a glass of wine and looked at the city skyline. And that's when it hit me. I didn't just want Carla gone. I wanted her seat. I wanted the power to make sure no one like her ever silenced someone like me again. And so I did something bold. I applied to her position. Yes, the very same one I had been too replaceable to ever imagine myself in. I didn't wait for someone to invite me to apply. I didn't ask permission. I took the initiative. I submitted a detailed proposal showing how I had not only crafted the campaign that landed our biggest client, but had done so with zero credit, zero resources, and still delivered results. And you know what? The partners noticed. Within 2 weeks, I was called in for an interview. Within 4, I was offered the job. I became the new head of campaign strategy at Brightleaf Creative. Carla's old office was cleaned out, her name removed from the glass, mine etched in. The first time I walked into that office, I stood behind the desk and looked out at the floor of people below, people like me, people who'd been talked over, underestimated, dismissed. And I swore I would be nothing like her. But I also wouldn't be silent ever again. Taking Carla down wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Because now with her gone, and my name finally being whispered in boardrooms, I wasn't content with survival. I wanted transformation. Not just for me, but for every person who had ever sat at the bottom of the ladder while someone above them climbed using their back. When I officially stepped into my new role as head of campaign strategy, the first thing I did was remove Carla's nameplate from the desk drawer where someone had left it behind. I didn't smash it. I didn't burn it. I mailed it to her. No note. No signature. Just cold polished metal in a padded envelope, a quiet reminder of the seat she lost and the woman who took it. My revenge wasn't loud. It was strategic. I started by cleaning house. Carla had created a culture of fear. Teams walked on eggshells, afraid to speak, afraid to suggest, afraid to be noticed. I flipped that. I instituted anonymous idea submissions for campaigns, ensuring that even the most junior employees had their voices heard. I encouraged collaboration transparency and gave public credit where it was due. And guess what? We thrived. The team that had once been muted began to bloom. Our creative output skyrocketed. One of our interns pitched a viral micro-campaign for a vegan snack brand that landed us 3 new clients. Another assistant developed a unique email automation strategy that boosted one client's sales by 40%, and I never once took credit for work that wasn't mine. But karma didn't stop at the office door. A few weeks into my new role, I got a LinkedIn notification that surprised me. Carla had updated her employment status. Open to work. No current job title. No company. Just a vague bio and a list of skills that sounded more desperate than confident. That same day, I got a message from someone in HR at a competing agency across town. Hi, Natalie. Hope you're well. We had an applicant for a senior campaign lead position, Carla Peters. Her references are a bit complex. Can we chat? I blinked. They were asking me about her. I thought about what to say. I could have unleashed everything. I could have torched her reputation with one fiery conversation. But instead, I kept it professional. I sent over the HR summary from our internal investigation, public documentation. Just facts. Just enough. I never heard back from them again. But 3 days later, Carla's job post disappeared, and her LinkedIn remained unchanged. Meanwhile, something else started happening. People I'd worked with. People who had once smiled politely and never looked past. My assistant badge began reaching out. Hey, Natalie, saw you got promoted. I'd love to collaborate sometime. I heard what happened. You handled it with class. We're impressed. And the one that meant the most, you inspired me to speak up. I've been dealing with something similar. And I finally went to HR. That message came from a young woman in another department. We'd only ever exchanged hellos in the hallway. She had watched from afar as I took my power back, and now she was finding her own. And that, to me, was the true revenge. Not Carla's fall, but the ripple I'd started by standing up. Still, there was one moment left, one final scene that brought everything full circle. 3 months after her suspension, I was asked to represent Brightleaf at a regional creative summit, a conference filled with executives, designers, and agency leaders from across the Midwest. I was scheduled to speak on a panel about creative integrity in modern branding. And who should I see checking badges at the event entrance, Carla? She wasn't a guest. She wasn't a speaker. She wasn't even attending the summit. She was working the door for the event staffing company. Wearing a black polo and a lanyard, she scanned passes and smiled thinly at each person who walked past. When I approached, her eyes met mine. We locked stares for a long, brutal second, and then I smiled. Good morning, I said. Hope they're treating you well. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Because in that single moment, everything I'd endured, the insults, the theft, the dismissal, the humiliation, crystallized into one glorious, silent victory. I didn't gloat. I didn't mock her. I just walked into the conference hall as the keynote speaker, while she stayed outside, checking names off a list she wasn't on. That's what karma looks like. Not always fire and fury. Sometimes it's just a quiet, steady climb, while the people who tried to hold you down watch you rise. Back at the summit, I took the stage. I spoke about ethics, creativity, collaboration. I talked about how real leadership isn't about hoarding ideas, but uplifting the people behind them. How success without integrity is just an illusion with an expiration date. And when I ended my speech, I didn't need to say Carla's name, but I did end with a line meant for her and everyone like her. They told me I was replaceable, so I believed them, and I replaced the part of me that stayed silent with the part that fights back. The room erupted into applause, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel less than. I didn't feel like an assistant wearing someone else's shoes. I felt exactly where I was supposed to be. It's been a year since that day. Sometimes I still walk past Carla's old desk, now mine, and pause. Not out of pride, not out of spite, but to remind myself of everything it took to get here. There are no trophies for surviving silent battles, no medals for standing up when your voice shakes. But there is peace. There's strength in knowing that I didn't just endure, I rebuilt. I rose. I don't think of myself as a revenge story anymore. I think of myself as a warning to those who mistake kindness for weakness, to those who think stealing someone's voice means they'll never find it again. Because the truth is, I was never replaceable. I was just underestimated. And that's the mistake Carla made. Today, I lead a team that thrives on collaboration, not fear. I mentor young women stepping into the corporate world, teaching them what I wish someone had taught me. That silence doesn't make you loyal, and invisibility isn't noble. Being overlooked doesn't mean you're unworthy. It means someone else failed to see you. And if that happens, make them watch you rise. Because when Carla told me I was replaceable, I believed her. So I replaced her. Not with pettiness, not with cruelty, but with truth, hard work, and the one thing she never had, integrity. And in the end, that made all the difference.